All right, I'm going to talk to you guys about stuttering. I chose stuttering because it's really important to know about as future SLPs. And so it also has a lot of neurological components as well. So the National Stuttering Association describes stuttering as a communication disorder involving disruptions or disfluencies in a person's speech. So really any kind of interruption that takes away from the meaning of someone's communication is considered stuttering. There are two types of stuttering. There's developmental and neurogenic. And developmental occurs in childhood. Between ages 2 and 7 is when its onset is. And neurogenic is much, much rarer, and it occurs in adulthood, and it can be caused by an emotional event, a stroke, an illness, or a traumatic brain injury. The physical impact of stuttering involves muscular tension, usually in the face or upper body, and it just makes the person really tense, and it makes speaking more difficult. And the more tense they get, the more issues they usually have with their stuttering. And this can range from mild to severe. So some people don't have issues with this really at all. And then the emotional impact includes anxiety, embarrassment, fear of speaking to other people, which of course is going to cause low self-esteem when you can't communicate effectively, and it can eventually even lead to depression. So it can be serious if the emotional impacts get way too severe. But stuttering doesn't have an exact cause. It may have a genetic component, and so the GNPTAB and NAGPA genes are proteins that have been found to link to the areas in the brain associated with stuttering, and they affect chromosome 12. Now this isn't for certain, but a lot of stutterers do have different chromosome 12 issues than normal speakers, but not always. So it's just one potential cause. And then the other cause of stuttering can be a traumatic event, which is extremely rare in the neurogenic situation, as I mentioned before. And so there's elevated brain activity that they've found in stutters. And one area is the left frontal operculum. And so this is responsible for expressive language. You can see it lit up here on the fMRI. But they found that it's just much more active in stutterers. The other place is the right anterior insular cortex, which is also lit up here. And it's responsible for emotional processing and motor control, which we've learned about in class. And the third one is the primary auditory cortex. And the top brain shows a stutterer speaking, and the bottom is a normal stutterer, or a normal speaker. And so you can see the stuttering brain is much more lit up, and so they just have a lot more activity going on. And so one way to treat this, if they suspected that the primary auditory cortex might be misfiring in a stutter, is to use an electronic fluency device. And what that does is provide feedback or white noise that's different, so the stutterer can't really hear themselves as well, and this focus becomes more on the proprioception of the articulators as opposed to the auditory feedback. The other hypothesis involving what stuttering can be caused from is the excessive dopamine hypothesis. And so a lot of times they found that there's elevation in dopamine in stutters, between 50 and 200% more dopamine in stutters than non-stutters, which is pretty significant. And so, of course, they have made drugs that can block this extra dopamine from being absorbed and can actually reduce the effects of stuttering. It's not a cure-all, but it's been shown to improve symptoms. The prevalence of stuttering is that 1% of the entire world stutters, and it's equally prevalent in boys and girls in childhood. But into adulthood, females are 3 times more likely to recover from stuttering than males, and they don't know why that is. They haven't done much research on it yet. The signs of stuttering are difficulty starting new words or phrases, prolonging sounds, repeating sounds, or phonemes, using a lot of ums, just excess difficulty communicating in general. So anything that really involves your stream of communication that causes interruptions is considered stuttering. Some symptoms of stuttering, which overlap quite a bit with the signs just because they can be observed by like a professional or just felt by the stutterer themselves. So both muscular tension can be both observed and felt. But the stutterer may feel increased difficulty to speak when they're tired, when they are emotionally compromised or extremely excited. And when they're put under pressure to perform, they almost always find an increase in their stuttering. Treatment involves several techniques. One is regulating and controlling breath stream. So this can involve singing or whispering, and it's just more rhythmic breathing and just being more aware of your breathing. And so sometimes an SLP will tell someone to just act like they're singing as they're talking and have like a sing-songy voice almost. And that's just one of the strategies. But they can also use to learn light articulatory contact, because a lot of times during a stuttering episode, the stutterer will just have really hard consonants and cause more tension and worsen their stuttering symptoms. So if they can use their light articulatory contact, they can reduce their tension and improve their overall speaking. Learning to control their speaking rate is also important. Many stutterers need to slow down because they talk too fast. And so by slowing down, they can usually gain more control over their articulators. And the other thing is to learn to control emotional response to stuttering. And this is huge because if the stutterer becomes frustrated or upset with themselves, then they often make their own stuttering worse. And then the final approach to this is time-syllabic speech. And this is a system where you put equal emphasis on each syllable. So a lot of times they will end up sounding monotonous or robotic, but it will reduce their stuttering most likely. Some more treatment strategies include the electronic fluency devices, which I mentioned previously in the auditory cortex. And so what an electronic fluency device does, it will either provide white noise through the ears of the stutterer, or delayed feedback, or something to alter their auditory reception of themselves. And so this reduces the importance of their auditory feedback, and they can focus more on their articulators and focus less on what is coming back into their ears. And then the other part of treatment that's crucial is parental involvement, which I'll talk about more later. But there's also pharmacologic treatments, and they basically target the overactive dopamine systems. And so here you can see we have a dopamine receptor, D2, and if you use one of these drugs, it will block the receptor and prevent the excess dopamine from being absorbed, therefore reducing the stuttering symptoms. This is not, like I said, a cure-all, but it definitely has been shown in some cases to reduce stuttering. Another important aspect is the parental response to stuttering. This can be huge, just to show your child that you support them and that you're listening and that you value what they're communicating with you, even if they're stuttering. So make sure you maintain eye contact with your child. You don't want to interrupt them. Definitely don't want to get frustrated with them, even if they are taking a long time to get what they want to say out. It can be very frustrating. You definitely do not want to tease your child, and do not subject your child to any unnecessary pressure to perform. So just maintain a very relaxed environment, and hopefully that will help them get more self-esteem and overcome the stuttering themselves. The prognosis for stuttering is that 80% of children outgrow their stuttering by the time they're 16, which is fairly good. And early intervention is key in making sure that your child outgrows their stutter. And it's unlikely that if stuttering lasts into adulthood that the adult will ever recover. So once again, early intervention is key, and adults will very, very rarely recover fully from stuttering. And then just to wrap up, I found this list of well-known stutterers that I thought was kind of interesting, and I'm sure you recognize several of them who were very successful. So this is just proof that stuttering is not a debilitating disease by any means, and you can still be extremely successful in life. And so stuttering is not something you should be terrified of.
I think the one thing I wanted to convey in my speech today for not so much the adults here, because I feel like the adults are fine. You're all sorted. Everyone here's got a lot of money and everyone's chilling. But more the kids that I hear that are going through the therapy, and I want to stress the point that it's not stuttering is not a thing you have to be worried about at all. And even if you have quirks and weirdness, you shouldn't be worried about that. I think the people that I went to school with were the most normal and were the coolest when we grew up. Like I was telling Emily earlier that one of the cool kids from school now does my plumbing. So that's a fact. That's a fact. So being sorry.